Okay. Well, of course, February is a wonderful month to be talking about all matters of the heart. And so we have quite a menu in store. Beginning this week with this concept of the heart of being. I decided to begin with that because everything springs from it. It's almost as if the foundation of understanding the heart of being is what contributes to our success in every other aspect of living from the heart. I have a quote here from Ernest Holmes. He's the founder of this movement, and what it says is, peace is the power at the heart of God. It is through the revelation of the self to the self that one understands life, that he approaches the power which is at the heart of God. This comes through a recognition of the unity of the individual with the Spirit back of, in, and through all. This comes through our awareness of our oneness with that peace and that power. So Holmes is telling us that that peace and that power is in the heart of God. And when we recognize that we are one with God, we will recognize that there is a peace and a power in our hearts as well. Much of what we do here is look at the creative process. We look at our individual experience of the creative process, and we talk endlessly about our beliefs. And before we get to that launch pad, if you will, that place, that jumping off place with our beliefs where we set something in motion and then we know now that the law of attraction, the law of cause and effect calls everything to us and gives shape and life to that which we've been thinking and feeling about. Before that, there is a precious, very fleeting moment of choice. One of Ernest Holmes' greatest inspirations is Thomas Troward, and Troward talks about the creative process in the individual, and he says that it begins with emotion. It begins with emotion. In looking at lots of science and philosophy and spiritual references about the heart and living from the heart, I enjoyed perusing the Heart Math website. Is anyone familiar with Heart Math? It's sort of like, I'll put it to you this way. I remember the first time I tried to understand enough about quantum physics to teach it in a class. And then I got there and said, never mind. You can read that book or go to that link. That's not my area of expertise. What I can tell you that I came away with, that I identified and remembered in just looking at it for the second or third time, is that the heart has a mind of its own. They call this the heart brain. This idea that first something is felt in the heart, then a signal is sent to the brain. Then we think about it and go into that choice and that action and everything that follows depending on the choice we make. And that corresponds beautifully to what Troward said back in the late 1800s and early 1900s about the creative process. First, something rises up from within us. If you think about it, people who tune in spiritually for their own meditative purpose and understanding, or to assist another, perhaps, there is this point that is before defined thought. It is before words. It's as if a block of information complete arrives to be recognized, identified, examined, and choices are made about it. So there's this time, it's actually not in time, when that knowledge, that wisdom, that understanding comes instantaneously through the heart. And then we say, we might refer to it as a gut feeling. It's a little bit higher, but we'll refer to it as something that just came to us in a flash. what we do then, according to how Troward describes it, is we make a decision about what to do with that idea, whether to follow it or not. We judge it as worthy of our pursuit and the investment of our thinking and our feeling, our believing, or not. That's what we do when we're conscious and aware. And then there's what we do when we're not. We continue to create without realizing that we're doing that. Of course, for many of us, we know that this is going on, so we're less likely to allow that creative process to unfold without us being present. So anyway, in the terms of Troward, we talk about this thing just welling up and getting our attention, and then we make a choice about it, and we set something in motion with that. And heart math says that scientifically, the heart senses something and sends messages to the brain, and then the brain does what it does, and so on and so on. So they correspond very nicely. The other thing that we commonly refer to this as is intuition. Intuition. Now, whether you read the works of Ernest Holmes or not, it doesn't matter. It's all universal truth. It's all gathered. He said that I really didn't have very many original thoughts. I gathered all of this stuff together in a way that worked for me, and I shared it with others, and it worked for them too. And we have this agreement to stay open at the top. So we are open. So intuition, according to Holmes, is the same as instinct, but you add conscious self-awareness to it. You think about the instinct of animals and the instinct of plants. Everything has within itself this automatic guidance system. It knows where to lean, where to go, when, all of that. And we have that same thing within us. However, because we are self-aware, and because we have free will, because we have choice, we get to say, no, I don't think so, or I think I will. We're free to listen to it and to heed it, or not. That's the big crux of the whole thing right there. We have the same built-in knowingness, the same built-in guidance system. We call it intuition. And yet we have the freedom to listen to it and to follow it, or make other plans. So we know that much. And what we can do this morning as we sit here together is say, gee, okay, I have to laugh because I can look back on a recent or distant scenario in which I didn't listen and I did make other plans. And things unfolded this way. I look back and I say, well, gosh, they told me hindsight was 20/20. They told me that I would see it more clearly later than I did in the moment. I venture to say that we needn't have that belief any longer. Let's just say we can add to that and say that hindsight is also 20/20. We have the gift of time in this life and time on this earth. We have the gift of our experience here to say, well, gosh, I've been around a few cycles, a few groups of 10, a few decades. I've been through a few jobs, a few relationships, a few places where I thought I'd live forever, a few things I thought I'd do forever, and so on. And I look back, and I'm able to see with clarity and gratitude the patterns in my experience. There are two things that we might see when we look back. We might see the times when we didn't listen and we didn't follow and something else happened. And we might also see those times when we did and say, oh, that is proof to me that there's something within me that knows. There's something within me that guides. There's something within me that I can listen to more. We reach this place where we're encouraged to look back not with regret, but with gratitude for the wisdom gleaned no matter which way we went, no matter what we did. There's an interesting thing, a phrase that says, all roads lead to Rome. And of course, that's old. And yet the wisdom in it still remains. I was thinking that our belief systems, if we thought of all of the beliefs that we have formed over our lives, each of them as anything from a superhighway to a little side road, to an alley or even a sidewalk or a footpath, if all of our beliefs were a system of pathways to us that we had created and either maintained or not maintained, think about our good being able to reach us. How could it do that except for by some pathway that we agree exists and we have kept clear, leads from all that is to us, to our awareness, to our thinking and choosing, to the access to our imagination and our will, our creative power, our believing. Could it be then that everything that has transpired in our lives could only come to us by way of one of those roads, one of those pathways? Perhaps one of them where we, let's say, we would prefer that it came to us through the pathway of sweetness and light. And yet something about our beliefs, our predominant beliefs over time, thought that pathway was overgrown with weeds and really hard to traverse, not very accessible. So perhaps that circumstance had to come to us by another path. It could be that the pathway that was kept most open was maybe, I don't know, maybe it was clearer and more direct, but it was a habit, maybe an emotional habit, a thinking habit that we had. Even if it wasn't the truth, it was what we were accustomed to believing. So the all good could only get to us and really get our attention by going that way. That's no less perfect. It may be less comfortable, but it's no less perfect. One of the things that is described in what I was looking at this week about emotion, of course, is that it is energy. And we think about these intuitive signals and senses coming from the heart, and we know what they feel like. Then they give a signal to the brain, and we start to think. And then we go back into our feeling place after having decided to engage with that thought and set other things in motion. There are two things about emotion that are really good to understand. And again, Holmes had something to say about that. One has to do with our capacity to control what we're feeling. And I'll come back to that in a second. The other is to recognize that we also have a choice about how we express what we're feeling. Actually, the control piece is not to try to keep anything repressed, certainly not. Not try to keep it down, but rather to recognize that as things well up within us, we have the capacity to choose what we will make them mean, the meaning that we will assign to them, the power or the weight that we will give them. We have the choice to choose what they mean. So we actually have the choice to choose what we will feel. For example, we might have something come up that seems a little frightening. It causes a little bit of fear, a little bit of worry. We have a choice as to whether we're going to let that just take hold of us and keep us from making some really good choices, decisions in our next move, if you will. If we're going to let it just take us over and incapacitate our reason and our capacity to do something about it. Or if we're going to say, yeah, I feel a little afraid. I feel a little anxious. I feel a little concerned. Deep breath. What will I do about that? And the other part, expression. Expression has to do with the fact that energy will have its outlet. Energy will have its outlet. So once again, pushing it down, pretending it's not happening, that will not work. It shows up in any number of ways, and it's so fascinating. Part of it is what we're going to explore in a couple of weeks when we look at the world as our mirror. When you do push something down, and it finds expression in your neighbor, in your partner, in your coworker, it finds expression near you in your world somehow. So when we say that it's important to have control, what we're talking about is that a healthy person recognizes that they have the capacity to choose how they feel and to use those feelings and those emotions consciously, on purpose, to create, because they do set the creative process in motion. And that expression is vital. It is literally vital. That means that it is required for life. We must allow energy to express by means of us. So just pretending it's not there won't work. Moving on from that then, we go back to this idea that, okay, we're talking about being, the heart of being. We're talking about living from the heart. We're saying that our heart has messages, that our heart is our sensory connection to God knowing, to the intuitive I am, allness, isness, all-knowingness, omniscience of all that is. That's our connection. So we do want to listen to it. If you look back, there's another thing about looking back. If you recall a situation or a circumstance in your life that went other than you would have had it go, think about what preceded it. Not just that the still small voice said go left and you went right, but even before that, if you tune in, you probably had a nonverbal physical feeling before that, almost like a premonition in your heart, perhaps in your solar plexus, that said, I can't identify what's up, but something's up. Something feels like it's about to happen. I recognize that I've had that experience shortly before I did something that I later regretted. And yet, here's the other part. We go back to this idea that there are no mistakes. There's no aspect of life that is not perfect. We go back to that when we say, well, it appears that at that time in my life, which could have been last week or last summer or 12 years ago or 20 years ago, the only way that the universe could get my attention and give me that piece of information was by that pathway. At the time, it was the best set of circumstances to meet that need. And boy, did it ever. You think about it. There's this line that, I don't know who originally said it, this idea that when you enter a chapter in your life and all you can see is, okay, now how do I say this up there being Marcia and no one else? Pony droppings. Okay, you know. When you have a place in your life that is full of doo-doo, you can look at it and say, there has to be a pony in here somewhere. And start digging, right? Of course, other people say that so much better than me. It's just not in my character to do it. The thing is, there isn't anything outside of perfection. There are no mistakes. There are just straighter paths and more circuitous ones. There are shorter distances and there are longer ones. And in every case, you'll always get where you're supposed to get. You'll always get back to the roam, to the home, to the place where you're meant to be. Because we're like water. We will do that. We must do that. And we do that. So the idea of the heart of being is to remember that each of us has a built-in sensor, a built-in piece of us that is eternally connected with the all-knowing. Gary Zukav calls that the seat of the soul. It is that thing within each of us that knows. And as we learn to trust it, as we learn to listen to it more, we can let those paths be straighter and shorter. We can say goodbye to quite as much drama. Misery is optional. We can say hello to more often having pleasant experiences of revelation, gentle experiences of revelation. And two ways to do that are to recognize that that still voice is still for a reason. I think it's because we get to be tricked into being still if we're ever going to tune into it. And the other thing is that it is small for a reason. Because we might, this is my theory, be tricked into being right-sized in order to meet it. So if we would like to practice living more successfully from the heart and master the heart of being, we have everything we require. It's already built in. It's not an extra or an add-on. It's standard issue for each and every one of us. And all we need ever do is be still and know that we are God. And so it is. I'd like to share an affirmation with you. This is something that we do less of around here. And this one I wrote back in North Carolina some years ago. So I'd like you to share it with me as our way of closing rather than a prayer. And then I'm going to sing a song, of course. I love my mind, for it is one with divine mind. I love my heart, for it is one with the heart of all creation. I love my body, for it is one with the body of God. I love my life, for it is one with all life. In this love I live, move, and have my being. And so it is.